I never believed prayer could change anything. Not after the winter took everything I loved. On Christmas night, a solitary rancher climbed into his hayloft expecting to find frozen straw and silence, and instead found a woman asleep in the hay, her arms wrapped around a baby already losing warmth. He could have closed the door. He should have. But once he lifted that child, the past cracked open, and a future he never planned began to breathe. By dawn, the fire would be burning too hot, the law would be riding slow, and a man with a claim would start circling the house. By spring, names would be written where knots once held, and a locked door at the end of the cabin would finally be opened, not for comfort, but for truth. Because the baby wasn't the only one being saved that night, and the prayer whispered over the fire was spoken before anyone realized the child's spoon bore a mark that didn't belong to her. Stay with this story to the very end. Subscribe for more Western love tales. And tell me, what city are you watching from? The lantern swayed in his hand as he crossed the yard, its light cutting a narrow path through the snow. Christmas night had settled deep and quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against a man's ears until he could hear his own breathing. He made this round every evening, had done so for years. Gates, stock, locks, then back to a house that held no voices. The barn door wasn't right. It stood just slightly ajar, no more than a hand's width, but enough. He stopped short, boots planted, breath fogging thick in the cold. He was certain he had closed it before dark, certain enough that his grip tightened on the lantern handle. "Wind," he murmured, though the air was still. He pushed the door open with his shoulder. The hinges creaked low. Inside, the smell of hay and animals lay heavy, the cold sharper here, biting through wool and leather alike. The horses shifted in their stalls, uneasy, hooves striking wood. He took 2 steps in, then froze. A sound reached him. Thin, broken. Not an animal, a baby. The cry came again, barely strong enough to carry, as if it might vanish if no one answered it. His chest tightened hard, sudden and painful. He raised the lantern higher, light trembling across beams and rafters, then toward the ladder leading up to the hayloft. Something was up there. For a moment he stood at the foot of the ladder, one hand on the rung, the other still holding the lantern. The old wood gave a warning creak under his weight. He bowed his head without thinking, breath leaving him in a rush. "Lord," he said quietly, the word rough from disuse. "Please." He climbed. The hayloft opened into lantern light in pieces. Loose straw, shadows, a shape curled tight against the far wall. The cry came again, weaker now. He swung the lantern wide and the sight stopped him cold. A woman lay on her side in the hay, her body curved protectively around a small bundle pressed to her chest. Frost dusted her dark hair. Her lips were tinged blue. The child in her arms was wrapped in a thin, soaked blanket, too still, too pale. They were freezing to death. He moved fast then, set the lantern down, dropped to his knees beside them. The woman startled at his touch, eyes flying open in wild fear. She tried to pull the child closer, tried to sit up, but her body failed her. "Please," she rasped. "Please, don't." "You're all right," he said, keeping his voice low, steady. "You're safe. I won't hurt you." The baby whimpered, a sound so small it barely seemed real. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around both of them, pulling it close, sealing in what little warmth remained. The woman sagged, strength gone, her forehead resting briefly against his shoulder. No more time. He gathered them carefully, one arm supporting the woman, the other cradling the child tight against his chest. The baby's heartbeat fluttered weakly through the thin fabric. Still there. Thank God, still there. Each step down the ladder was slow and measured, the old wood groaning beneath the weight of 3 lives balanced between slipping and falling. When his boots hit the barn floor, he didn't stop. He pushed through the door and into the night, snow stinging his face as he crossed the yard toward the house. Inside, the cabin was dark and cold, the fire long burned down to ash and embers. He laid them gently on the rug near the hearth and went to work without thinking. Kindling first, then split logs, a spark. A breath held too long. The fire caught. Heat bloomed outward, light spilling across the woman's pale face and the child's small, still form. He knelt close, removing wet layers with careful hands, keeping movements respectful, efficient. The woman stirred faintly, but did not wake. The child's breathing came shallow and quick. Easy, he murmured, more to himself than to them. He warmed water, not hot, never hot, and applied it slowly to the child's hands and feet, watching for signs of returning circulation. He wrapped the baby in wool and flannel, then drew her close, pressing her small body against his chest beneath his shirt, skin to skin, sharing what warmth he had. The baby let out a soft sound. Not a cry this time. Something closer to relief. The woman's breathing deepened slightly, color returning in faint traces to her cheeks. He fed the fire again, building it up, then settled back on his heels, eyes fixed on the 2 figures on the floor. Outside, snow continued to fall, thick and silent. Inside, a man who had lived alone for far too long kept watch through the longest part of the night, hands steady, heart hammering, knowing without fully understanding that something had shifted the moment he climbed that ladder. That was the night everything went wrong, and the night everything began. She woke with a sharp intake of breath, panic flaring before memory caught up. For one wild moment she fought, clutching at the air, searching for the weight that should have been in her arms. My baby, she's here. The voice was low and steady, coming from just beyond the edge of the firelight. She turned her head too fast, and pain bloomed behind her eyes. The room spun, then settled. Warmth pressed in on her from every side. Too much warmth, sudden and unfamiliar after so long in the cold. Her gaze found the child first. The baby lay bundled close to the hearth, wrapped in thick blankets, her tiny chest rising and falling in a soft, even rhythm. Color had returned to her cheeks. She slept with one small fist curled beneath her chin, peaceful in a way that made the woman's throat close. "Oh," she whispered, tears burning. "Oh, thank God." "She's warming up," the man said. "Both of you are." He sat a few steps back, far enough to give space, close enough to reach them if needed. In the firelight, she could see him clearly now. Broad-shouldered, worn by years of weather and work. His coat laid aside, sleeves rolled up, hands red and rough from the cold. There was no hunger in his eyes, no expectation, only watchfulness. Where am I?" she asked. My house, he answered. You were in the hayloft, nearly frozen through. The memory came back in pieces. The barn, the ladder, the way her legs had stopped obeying her. She pushed herself up on one elbow, wincing. Instinct drove her toward the baby. He moved at once, lifting the child and placing her gently back into her arms. The weight of her settled everything. The baby stirred, made a small sound, then quieted again. Easy, he said. Don't rush. She studied his hands as he withdrew them, slow, deliberate, as if afraid of startling her. It was then she noticed the coat around her shoulders. Heavy, warm, not hers. You didn't have to, she said, though the words sounded weak even to her own ears. I did, he replied simply. You wouldn't have made it till morning. That truth landed hard. She swallowed, pressing her lips to the baby's hair. Thank you, she said. I won't forget it. He nodded once as if that were enough. For a few moments they sat in silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The warmth seeped deeper, pulling exhaustion up from places she hadn't known were empty. Her hands trembled. She tried to hide it. He noticed anyway. Can you drink? He asked, rising. He ladled something from a pot she hadn't seen before and brought it over carefully. It's broth, not too hot. She accepted the cup with both hands. The smell alone made her dizzy. She sipped, slowly, following his quiet instruction. Strength returned in small increments, like light creeping in at dawn. My name is Clara, she said at last, because silence felt too much like debt. And this is Rosie, he glanced at the baby, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. She's a fighter, he said. Both of you are. She almost laughed at that, a short, breathless sound that ended in a cough. I don't feel much like one. You don't have to, he said. Not tonight. She studied him again, really studied him this time. The cabin around them was spare, clean, nothing extra, no signs of a woman's touch, no softness beyond what necessity required. It felt like a place built for endurance, not comfort. How long can we stay? She asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. As long as you need to get your strength back. I don't have money, she said quickly. I can work. I can... He held up a hand, stopping her gently. You don't owe me anything. Winter's not a time to turn people out. And there's a baby involved. Her eyes dropped to Rosie's sleeping face. Shame pricked sharp and familiar. I was only looking for shelter for the night, she said. I didn't mean to. Doesn't matter what you meant, he said. You're here now. Something in his tone, final, unarguable, made her chest ache. She nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't betray how close she was to breaking. The baby stirred again, fussing softly. Instinct took over. Clara adjusted her, murmuring under her breath, offering comfort with practiced ease. The man turned his face away, giving privacy without being asked. The baby settled. She'll need to eat soon, Clara said. I haven't had much. We'll manage, he said. One step at a time. She followed his gaze as it drifted briefly to a closed door at the far end of the cabin. It stood out for its care. The wood polished, the handle untouched by years of use. Something about it made her look away again just as quickly. Thank you, she said once more, softer now, for letting us stay. He met her eyes. You're not a burden, he said, as if reading a thought she hadn't voiced. Not here. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, warmth held. She drew Rosie closer, breathing her in, letting the exhaustion finally claim its due. As her eyes closed, one last thought slipped through her defenses, fragile and dangerous as hope. They had survived the night. For now, that was enough. Morning came in pale and slow, light seeping through the frosted window panes like it had to ask permission to enter. The fire had burned low again, but the room still held warmth. The kind that lingered after a hard night's work was done. She woke to the sound of movement. Not hurried, not loud. Just the steady rhythm of someone who knew his space and moved through it without wasting a step. The baby slept against her chest, heavy and warm. That alone told her the night had truly passed. She sat up carefully, joints aching, head still light, and watched him from the edge of the blankets. He stood at the table with his back to her, sleeves rolled, pouring water from a kettle into a tin cup. He moved like a man used to being alone. No need to announce himself, no need to ask. The room bore the marks of that kind of life. Everything had its place, nothing extra. You're awake, he said, without turning. How do you feel? Better, she answered. It was mostly true. She touched the baby's forehead. Normal. Relief washed through her so strong it made her eyes sting. He turned then, setting the cup down and bringing it over. Drink this. Small sips. She did as told. The water was warm, faintly bitter from whatever leaves he'd added. It settled her stomach, steadied her hands. She hadn't realized how badly they'd been shaking until they stopped. Thank you, she said again. The words were beginning to feel thin. He nodded, then crouched near the hearth to coax the fire back to life. She watched the flames catch, the way he fed them just enough, never too much. He was careful with things that could get out of hand. The baby stirred, fussing softly. She shifted her weight, adjusting the blankets. Something slipped from the fold of her sleeve and dropped to the floor with a small, sharp sound. Metal on wood. Her breath caught. He looked over at once. You dropped something. She moved too quickly, reaching for it before he could, fingers closing tight around the small object. Too late. He had already seen it. It was only a spoon. Tin. Old. The handle worn smooth, the bowl dented from use. Nothing of value. Everything, all the same. It's hers, she said quickly. For later. I keep it close. He studied it for a moment, not taking it from her, just looking. Only one? She nodded. It was my mother's. That was all she offered. He didn't press. He turned back to the fire as if that ended the matter. It didn't, not really, but she was grateful all the same. When she stood to set the baby down on the blankets near the hearth, the room swayed. She grabbed the chair to steady herself. He was there instantly, a hand hovering near her elbow without touching. Slow, he said. You're still weak. I'm fine, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. She lowered herself into the chair and smoothed the baby's blanket, forcing her hands to be steady. He returned to the table, cracking eggs into a pan. The smell filled the room, rich and real. Her stomach clenched painfully. He noticed. "You need to eat," he said. "I don't want to take—" "You already are," he interrupted gently. "Might as well do it properly." She looked down, shame rising hot and familiar. Before she could speak, a sound drifted in through the thin walls. Hooves. She froze. The sound was distant, barely more than an impression, but her body knew it all the same. She turned her head toward the window, heart hammering. He followed her gaze, his posture shifting, attention sharpening. "Do you have visitors?" she asked, keeping her voice level with effort. "Not this early," he said. "Not without telling me first." The hooves passed, the sound fading toward the road. She let out the breath she'd been holding. Her fingers trembled. She curled them into her skirt to hide it. He saw anyway. "Someone looking for you?" he asked quietly. She shook her head too fast. "No, I mean, no one who should be." He didn't accept that. Not fully. But he didn't call her on it either. He slid the pan off the fire and brought her a plate, setting it down within reach. "You can stay," he said. "No one's coming here without me knowing." The certainty in his voice was a comfort and a warning both. As she ate, he moved about the cabin, tidying, setting things right. When he passed the far end of the room, her eyes drifted again to the closed door. She hadn't meant to look, but something about it drew her attention like a bruise you couldn't stop touching. He noticed her looking. "That room's not in use," he said, a fraction too quickly. "You won't need it." "I wasn't asking," she replied softly. They shared a brief, understanding silence. Two people who knew better than to pry at wounds not yet ready to be named. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint sound of voices from far off. Or maybe that was only her fear, giving shape to the air. She pulled the baby closer, one hand resting protectively over the small, warm body. The spoon lay hidden again in her sleeve, a weight she could feel with every movement. Some things were meant to be kept out of sight. Some truths, if seen too soon, could ruin everything. She did not stay in the chair long. By the time the plate was empty, she had already pushed herself to her feet, moving slowly but with purpose. He watched from the stove as she gathered the cups, rinsed them at the basin, and set them back where she must have seen him place them earlier. It wasn't the work that caught his attention. It was the way she did it. Careful, contained, as if every small task were a statement. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I want to," she replied, not looking at him. "I can't just sit." The baby lay on the blanket near the hearth, awake now, eyes bright, following the movement of light across the ceiling. A soft sound escaped her, something between a breath and a laugh. The woman paused, crouched, and brushed her fingers across the child's cheek, her face easing in a way it hadn't yet for him. "She's stronger," he said. "She is," she answered. "She always is." He turned back to the stove, but the words stayed with him. Always. As if strength were something you learned early and carried whether you wanted it or not. When she straightened again, she swayed. Just for a second. He crossed the room in 2 strides and caught her elbow before she could fall. She stiffened at the contact, instinctive and sharp. "I've got you," he said. "Easy." She nodded, mortified, pulling away as soon as she was steady. "I don't want you thinking—" "I'm not thinking anything," he interrupted, "except that you pushed too hard." She folded her hands in front of her, jaw set. "I won't." He studied her a moment longer, then stepped back, giving her the space she clearly needed. He'd learned long ago that some people needed room more than reassurance. The knock came just after noon. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hurried. It was the kind of knock that assumed it would be answered. Both of them heard it. She froze where she stood, eyes going wide, hand flying to the baby without conscious thought. He turned toward the door, every muscle tightening, mind already working through possibilities. "I wasn't expecting anyone," he said quietly. She swallowed. "Neither was I." He crossed the room and opened the door just enough to see who stood outside. Cold air spilled in, sharp and unwelcome. A man stood on the step, hat tipped back, badge catching the light. "Morning," the visitor said easily. "Hope I'm not interrupting." He didn't answer at once. "What can I do for you?" "Just making the rounds," the man said. "Checking in, making sure everyone made it through the storm." Behind him a horse stamped, impatient. The man's eyes slid past the doorway, lingering a moment too long on the warmth within. "We did," he said. "As you can see." The visitor smiled, thin and practiced. "Good to hear. Noticed some tracks by the barn. Looked fresh." She could hear every word from where she stood. Her heart pounded so hard she was afraid it might give her away. "Animals," he said. "They wander." "Of course," the man replied. His gaze flicked again, sharper this time. "No trouble to report?" "No," he said. A pause stretched between them. The visitor's eyes narrowed slightly, then he tipped his hat. "Well, if there is," he said, "you know where to find me." "I do." The door closed. The latch slid home with a final, solid sound. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath until it left her all at once. Her knees weakened. She sank back into the chair, pulling the baby close, rocking without noticing she'd begun. "Who was that?" she asked. "The law," he said simply. Her mouth went dry. "Did you tell him?" "No." The relief that crossed her face was immediate and unmistakable. It was followed just as quickly by guilt. "I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door," she said. "I should go." He shook his head once. "Not today." "You don't understand," she insisted, voice low and urgent. "I can't be found." "That much I gathered," he said. "What I don't understand is why you think leaving right now would help." She opened her mouth, then closed it. There were no words she could offer that wouldn't expose too much. He crouched in front of her, keeping his voice steady. "No one's dragging you out of here. Not while you're under my roof." Her eyes filled despite her best effort to stop it. She turned her face away, ashamed of the weakness. The baby fussed softly, sensing the tension. She adjusted her, murmuring under her breath until the sound faded. "I don't want charity," she said at last. "This isn't charity," he replied. "It's shelter." She met his eyes then, searching for something. Pity, expectation, a price yet to be named. She found none of it. "All right," she said quietly. "Just until she's stronger." He nodded. "We'll take it one day at a time." Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the eaves. Inside, the fire burned steady. The baby slept, warm and safe between them. For now, they were still standing. For now, that would have to be enough. The second knock came after dark. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It carried a patience that set a man on edge, the kind that said whoever stood on the other side knew exactly how long he could wait. He was at the table mending tack when he heard it. The baby slept in the dresser drawer near the hearth, swaddled deep, her breath soft and steady. She stood by the stove, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour, the last of the bread rising where the warmth could reach it. Both of them froze. He looked up. She didn't have to speak. The tension in her shoulders said enough. "Stay here," he said quietly. He crossed the room without hurry and took his coat from the peg. He did not reach for his rifle. That choice was deliberate. He opened the door just wide enough to step outside and closed it behind him. Cold wrapped him instantly. Snow had started again, fine and persistent, whispering against the boards. A man stood on the porch, hat brim low, face shadowed. Not the law this time. "Evening," the stranger said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Sorry to call so late." "You've called," he replied. "State your business." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Looking for someone. Thought you might have seen her pass through." "I don't keep track of passers-by." "Most don't," the man said. "But some notice a woman with a baby. Hard to miss." A warning bell rang low and steady in his chest. "You should go, he said. "This isn't the place." The stranger's gaze drifted, just slightly, to the door behind him. "Funny thing," he said. "I could have sworn I heard a child in there." Silence stretched. Snow settled on the brim of the man's hat. He did not move aside. "There's nothing here for you," he said. The stranger's smile thinned. "I'd hate to think you were lying to me." "I don't much care what you think." For a moment, it seemed the man might press the issue. Instead, he tipped his hat with mock politeness. "If you change your mind," he said, "I'll be around." He stepped back into the night, boots crunching away toward the road. The sound of hooves followed, then faded. He stood there long after the porch was empty, breath smoking white, listening until there was nothing left to hear. Inside, the fire cracked softly. When he opened the door again, she was standing where he had left her, arms wrapped tight around herself. The baby slept on, unaware. "Who was that?" she asked, though she already knew. "Trouble," he said. "The kind that doesn't announce itself properly." Her face went pale. She crossed the room in 2 steps and checked the baby, pressing her cheek lightly to the small, warm head. Only then did she look back up. "He shouldn't have come here," she said. "I told him I'd be gone." "You told who?" She closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them again, the fight was gone, replaced by something harder. "There's a man who thinks he owns what he's given," she said, "and takes what he hasn't." He didn't interrupt. "I took the baby and ran," she continued. "I thought if I kept moving, he'd lose the trail." "He won't," he said. Not unkindly, just honest. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I can't stay." She reached for her shawl, hands shaking as she gathered it up. He stepped into her path without touching her. "You leave now," he said, and you won't make it 10 miles before someone notices. That's better than waiting here, she shot back. Better than dragging you into it. He held her gaze. You're already here. The baby stirred, letting out a small, uncertain sound. She stilled instantly, rocking without thinking. The sound faded. You think I don't see it? She said, voice breaking despite her effort. The way they look at you when they talk about me. This is your home, your life. I won't be the reason it burns. He thought of the barn, the open door, the ladder, the weight of a child against his chest. He thought of a room at the far end of the house that had stayed closed for years because opening it felt like a betrayal. Listen to me, he said, low and firm. No one takes you from this house tonight. That man can wait, he said. So can the law. Her breath hitched. She stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. You'd risk everything for us? For the baby, he corrected, then stopped. And for what's right. She looked away, blinking hard. I never asked for this. Neither did I, he said. That doesn't change what's in front of us. The bread in the oven gave a soft, hollow sound as it finished rising. The fire shifted. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls. She lowered herself into the chair, suddenly exhausted. He knelt and adjusted the fire, feeding it just enough to keep the warmth steady through the night. We'll need a plan, she said quietly. He nodded. We will. Neither of them spoke of leaving. Neither spoke of staying forever. The baby slept on, unaware of how close the world had come to finding her, and how fiercely two strangers had begun to stand in its way. Sleep came in pieces that night. He lay awake long after the fire had settled into a steady burn, listening to the sounds of the house. The wind worried at the eaves. Wood shifted as it cooled. And beneath it all, softer than anything else, the steady breathing of a child who did not know how close she had come to being taken. She slept on the settee near the hearth, the baby tucked against her chest, one arm curved protectively around the small, warm body. Even in rest, her brow remained faintly furrowed, as if she were bracing for something that might come crashing through the door at any moment. He did not go to her. That, too, was deliberate. Instead, he stood and crossed the cabin quietly, boots soundless on the worn boards, stopping at the far end of the room. The door there looked no different from any other. Same height, same plain wood. But he had not touched its handle in years. He rested his hand on the frame instead. The night he had closed it, he had done so carefully, had locked it, had told himself it was only for a while, until the pain dulled, until breathing did not feel like work. Somehow, 5 years had passed without him noticing. A soft sound drifted behind him. He turned to find her awake, watching him. The firelight caught in her eyes, giving them a depth he had not seen before. She shifted carefully so as not to wake the baby. I didn't mean to stare, she said quietly. I just saw you there. He lowered his hand. It's nothing. She studied the door, then him. It doesn't look like nothing. He almost smiled at that. Almost. Some rooms aren't meant to be used, he said. Or opened, she replied. He nodded once. That was closer to the truth than he cared to admit. She looked down at the baby, smoothing a dark curl away from the small forehead. I used to think that too, she said. That if I didn't open certain doors, the things behind them couldn't hurt me again. And did it work? He asked. Her mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. For a while. The fire popped, sending sparks skittering up the chimney. The baby stirred, made a small sound, then settled again. He felt the pull of it then, the weight of what lay between them, unspoken but heavy. You shouldn't stay up, he said. You need rest. She nodded, but didn't move. I'm afraid if I sleep too deeply, I won't hear it if someone comes. You'll hear it, he said, and so will I. She searched his face as if measuring the truth of that promise. Whatever she found there made her ease back against the cushions. I don't know how long we can hide, she said. I don't want you waking one morning to find your barn burned or your name dragged through town. He thought of the stranger's smile, of the lawman's eyes lingering too long, of how quickly a place like this could turn on a man. Neither do I, he said. But running blind won't save you. Her fingers tightened briefly in the baby's blanket. I never meant to make anyone choose sides. You didn't, he said. This country does that all on its own. She let out a quiet breath. If it comes to it, if you need me gone to protect what's yours. He turned fully then. I won't trade a child's safety for my comfort. The words surprised them both. Her eyes filled, just slightly. She blinked it back. You don't know me. I know enough, he said. And I know her. The baby shifted, one tiny hand escaping the blankets. Without thinking, he crossed the room and gently tucked it back in, his fingers brushing warm skin. The child sighed in her sleep. The sound hit him harder than he expected. She watched his hand linger, watched his jaw tighten, as if he were holding something back. You've done this before, she said softly. He withdrew his hand. A long time ago. Silence stretched again, different this time, thicker, more dangerous. I won't ask you to open that door, she said, nodding toward the far end of the room. Some things take time. He met her gaze, and some don't. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faint, distant sound of something moving along the road. A wagon, perhaps, or a rider passing slow. She stiffened. He stood at once, listening until the sound faded. They're close, she whispered. Yes, he said. They are. She drew the baby closer, her body angling instinctively toward him, seeking shelter without quite meaning to. He felt it then, the line crossing, the space between strangers narrowing into something far more dangerous. I won't leave her, she said, no matter what. Nor should you, he replied. The fire burned low but steady, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. The closed door at the far end remained shut. Its presence felt more keenly now than ever. Some thresholds were meant to be crossed. Others waited, patient and unforgiving, for the moment a man decided whether fear or faith would guide his hand. That moment was coming. He could feel it in his bones. The truth came out the next morning without ceremony. It slipped free the way some things did, quietly, when no one was braced for it, while he was repairing a broken latch by the door and she was folding blankets near the hearth. The baby lay between them on the floor, content, batting at the edge of a worn sleeve. She had been silent most of the morning, Not withdrawn, exactly, just careful, like someone walking across thin ice, measuring each step before putting her weight down. He noticed when her hands began to shake. "Sit," he said, without looking up. "I'm fine." "You're not," he replied, and set the tools aside. He crossed the room and pulled the chair back for her. This time she did not argue. She sat, pressing her palms to her skirt as if anchoring herself. For a long moment, she stared into the fire. Then she spoke, words coming out flat, as though rehearsed too many times to carry much feeling anymore. "He wasn't just someone I ran from," she said. "He was someone I depended on." He waited. "When the baby's father died, I had nothing," she continued. "No family willing to take us in. No work that would keep a roof over our heads. He offered help, a room, food, time." Her mouth tightened. "Nothing is ever free." The baby made a small sound, gurgling happily, unaware of the weight settling into the room. She glanced down, swallowed hard, then went on. "When I refused what he wanted, the help stopped," she said. "When I still refused, the threats started. He said he'd take the child, said no one would question it. A man like him, with papers and friends in town." She broke off, breath hitching. He stepped closer without touching her, a quiet presence at her side. "I ran the night she was born," she said. "Didn't even wait until I could walk properly. I wrapped her up and left before dawn." The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had drawn in. He thought of the man on the porch, the smile that hadn't reached his eyes, the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted because the world had taught him it would look the other way. "He thinks you belong to him," he said. She nodded. "And that you're in his way." Silence settled, heavy and final. He crouched in front of her then, lowering himself so they were eye to eye. "He won't take her," he said. "Not from this house." "You can't fight him," she said quickly. "Not the way he fights. He doesn't need a gun. He just needs time." "I'm aware," he said. She reached for the baby, lifting her into her arms, clinging a little too tightly. "If I stay, he'll keep coming. He'll make trouble for you, for anyone who stands with us." "That's already happening," he replied. "The question is what we do about it." Her gaze flicked to the far end of the cabin, to the closed door she now knew better than to ignore. "You've already lost enough," she said softly. "I won't be the reason you lose more." He straightened slowly. "You don't get to decide that alone." The words surprised her. They surprised him, too. He turned away, pacing once across the room, then back. "I've lived by myself long enough to know the difference between peace and quiet," he said. "This," he gestured vaguely between them, to the baby, to the fire. "This isn't trouble. It's responsibility." Her eyes shone. "That's not fair." "Neither is what he's doing," he said. "But fairness rarely enters into it." Outside, a wagon passed on the road, the sound of wheels carrying through the cold air. Both of them listened until it faded. "They'll try the law next," she said. "Papers, claims, something official enough to make you doubt yourself." "Then we answer it officially," he said. She shook her head. "You don't understand how men like him work." "I understand enough," he said. They rely on people being afraid to stand up where others can see. The baby shifted, reaching one small hand toward his coat. Without thinking, he took it gently between his fingers. The grip was weak but determined. Something settled in his chest then, solid and unyielding. "I won't hide her," he said, "and I won't hand her over." Her breath caught. "Even if it costs you?" He looked at the child, at the woman who had crossed a winter landscape with nothing but stubborn hope to keep her moving, at the fire that had burned through the night because he had chosen not to walk away. "Yes," he said. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and unstoppable. She didn't bother wiping them away. "I was afraid to hope," she admitted. "Every time I've hoped, it's been taken from me." He thought of a small grave beneath a cottonwood tree, of a room he had sealed shut because opening it felt like an invitation to more pain. "Hope doesn't ask permission," he said. "It just shows up." The baby let out a soft, delighted sound, as if agreeing. She smiled despite herself, a fragile thing that trembled on the edge of breaking. "They'll come again," she said. "Soon." "I know," he replied. "And when they do, we'll be ready." Outside, the day moved on, indifferent to the choices being forged within the cabin walls. Inside, a line had been crossed, not of violence, of loyalty. And once crossed, there would be no going back. By late afternoon, the house felt watched, not in any way that could be pointed to or named. No rider in the yard, no shadow pressed against the window, just the sense that the air itself had learned how to listen. He felt it first while mending a length of fence near the barn. The wire caught on his glove, snapping back hard enough to sting. He straightened slowly, eyes sweeping the tree line, the road, the low rise beyond the corral. Nothing moved. Still, the feeling remained. When he went back inside, she was standing at the window, the baby held tight against her shoulder. She didn't turn when he entered. "Someone's out there," she said quietly. "I know." They didn't argue about it. That too felt like a change. He set his tools aside and began moving through the house with purpose. Extra wood stacked by the hearth, the back door barred, lanterns checked and set where they could be reached quickly. Not preparation for a fight, preparation for staying put. She watched him, learning his rhythm, stepping in where she could without being asked. She folded blankets and placed them near the fire. She filled the kettle and set it ready. She kept the baby close but not hidden, as if refusing to shrink herself any further. At dusk, hoofbeats sounded on the road again. They both heard them. She froze. He didn't. "Stay where you are," he said, voice low but calm. He didn't go to the door this time. He stood near it, listening. The sound slowed, then stopped. A murmur of voices carried through the thin walls, too far to catch words, close enough to tighten the chest. The baby fussed, sensing the tension. She rocked gently, murmuring, her voice steady despite the fear written plain in her eyes. The voices moved on. For now. "They're measuring," she said, "seeing how much pressure it takes." He nodded. "And how much they can do without being seen." Silence fell again, heavier than before. "We can't stay like this," she said after a while. "Waiting." "No," he agreed. "We need daylight and witnesses." Her grip on the baby tightened. "Town?" "Eventually," he said. "Not tonight." She looked at him, understanding dawning. You want them to come back. I want them to come back where people can see them, he replied, and hear them. She swallowed. That's dangerous. So is running, he said. The baby's eyes fluttered, then closed, sleep finally claiming her. He watched the small chest rise and fall, felt something settle into place. She trusts you, she said softly. I can see it. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. Children know when they're safe. She looked at him then, really looked. And are we? The question hung between them, unanswerable and unavoidable. Before he could respond, a sound reached them from outside. Not hooves this time. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. They stopped just beyond the door. The knock came a moment later. Firm, confident, different from before. He raised a hand, signaling her back. She retreated a step, pressing herself and the baby into the deeper shadow near the hearth. He opened the door. The lawman stood there, hat pulled low, breath steaming in the cold. Another man lingered a few paces behind him, half hidden by the falling dark. Not close enough to hear, close enough to threaten. Evening, the lawman said. We need to talk. About what? He asked. About harboring, the lawman replied, and about a complaint that's been made. She's not property, he said flatly. The lawman's eyes flicked past him, catching the faint outline of movement inside. That remains to be decided. No, he said. It doesn't. A pause. Long. Measured. You're asking for trouble, the lawman said at last. I didn't ask, he replied. It showed up. The man behind the lawman shifted, boots scraping softly. The lawman glanced back, then forward again, jaw tight. This isn't over, he said. You'd do well to remember that. He didn't step aside, didn't argue further. The lawman hesitated, then turned away, signaling the other man to follow. The door closed. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. He crossed the room and rested a hand on the back of the chair beside her. Not touching. Close enough. They'll come back with papers, she said. Or with men. Yes, he said. And if they take you in, they won't, he said, then softened. Not without trying first. She looked down at the baby, then back up. If this breaks wrong, I'll leave. I won't let her grow up running from men like that. He shook his head. If it breaks wrong, we face it together. The words felt heavy, final. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the windows, pressing hard against the walls. Inside, the fire burned steady, fed, and watched. She leaned back against the chair, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. He took the baby gently and laid her down, covering her carefully. As he straightened, he realized the house no longer felt like his alone. It felt like something being defended. And once defended, it could not easily be surrendered. They left before dawn. Not because it was safe, but because waiting had begun to feel like surrender. The fire was banked low, the house set in order the way he always did before riding out. Habits clung to a man even when the world was coming apart. She wrapped the baby tight, layer over layer, her movements quick and practiced, jaw set, as if speed alone might keep fear at bay. He hitched the team without a word. The sky was still dark, a thin line of gray just beginning to show along the horizon. The road lay empty, too empty. They climbed onto the wagon seat together, the baby tucked between them, warm and quiet. He took up the reins. The horses leaned into the traces, breath steaming as the wagon rolled forward, boards creaking under the weight. For a time it seemed they might make it. The road stretched ahead, pale and hard in the half-light. The trees stood back, watching. She let herself breathe, just a little, her cheek resting briefly against the baby's head. Then the child stirred. At first it was nothing, just a shift, a small sound. She adjusted the blankets, murmuring softly. The sound came again, sharper this time, edged with distress. "No," she whispered. "No, no." She pressed her hand to the baby's forehead, her face drained of color. "She's too warm," she said, voice breaking. "She's burning." He pulled the reins without hesitation, bringing the team to a halt. The wagon rocked once, then settled. He reached for the child, feeling the heat through layers of cloth. It was wrong, sudden, dangerous. "We have to go back," she said, panic rising fast. "Now!" He turned the wagon around in the narrow road, horses snorting in protest, and urged them into motion. The house came back into view far too slowly, each yard of ground feeling like a mile stolen from them. The baby cried then, not loud, not strong, a thin, exhausted sound that cut deeper than any scream. She rocked, pleaded, pressed kisses to the small, hot forehead. "Hold on," she whispered. "Please, just hold on." By the time they reached the yard, the sky had lightened to a dull, colorless gray. He lifted the baby down and carried her inside, not bothering with the door, just pushing it open with his shoulder. He laid the child on the rug by the hearth and went to his knees, hands already moving, stripping back blankets, checking breath, pulse, skin, too fast, too shallow. She hovered, shaking, useless with fear. "What do we do?" He didn't answer. He didn't have one. The fire was low. He fed it, hard, building it up, then reached for water, cooling cloths, everything he could think of. He worked the way he always did, steady, controlled, but the old certainty was gone. This was not cold he was fighting now. This was something else. "She can't," her voice broke completely. "I can't lose her. I can't." The baby's cries weakened, fading to thin whimpers. Her small body trembled, then went frighteningly still. Something in him gave way. He bowed his head right there on the floor, hands still braced on either side of the child. "Lord," he said aloud, the word tearing free of him. "Please." The room seemed to hold its breath. "I don't ask much," he went on, voice rough, unguarded. "I didn't ask when you took what was mine. I lived with it. I learned to stand quiet. But not this. Don't take her." She stared at him, stunned. She had never heard him pray. Not like this. "Take it out of me," he said hoarsely. "Take whatever you need. Just leave her." The baby shuddered, drew in a ragged breath. He froze. Again, she breathed. Shallow, but there. Color crept, faint and fragile, back into her cheeks. She sobbed, dropping to her knees, pressing her forehead to the floor beside the child. He stayed where he was, afraid to move, afraid the moment might break if he did. Minutes passed, then more. The fire crackled. The baby's breathing steadied, slow and even. The crisis eased, inch by agonizing inch. She slumped against him when it was over, exhaustion hollowing her out. He caught her automatically, holding her and the child together, the way his body seemed to know how to do even when his mind rebelled at the memory. "I lied," she whispered into his shoulder. "About where we were going. About having somewhere to go." He didn't pull away. "I know." She looked up at him, eyes red and bare. "I didn't want to stay where I wasn't wanted. I thought leaving would hurt less." He met her gaze, something open and unguarded in his expression now. "It hurts either way." Outside, the light strengthened, morning pushing its way into the world, whether they were ready or not. Inside, a baby slept, her small chest rising and falling, alive. He drew a breath that felt like the first in a very long time. They had tried to leave, and the world had stopped them. Some choices, it seemed, would not be outrun. The house stayed quiet after the worst of it passed. Not the hollow quiet of before, but a careful one. Like everyone inside was afraid to move too quickly and break something fragile. The baby slept near the hearth, her breath even, her small body finally cooling beneath layers of clean cloth. He watched her longer than necessary, counting each rise and fall of her chest until his own breathing matched it. She sat on the floor with her back against the settee, arms wrapped around her knees. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier, but the fear had not left it entirely. "They won't stop," she said. "What happened out there won't scare them away." "No," he agreed. "It won't." She lifted her head. "Then what do we do?" He didn't answer right away. He rose, crossed the room, and reached for a length of rope hanging from a peg near the door. It was old, well used, the fibers softened by years of work. He brought it back to the table and set it down between them. Her brow furrowed. "What's that for?" "Deciding," he said. He sat, took the rope in both hands, and began to work it slowly, deliberately, forming a knot he'd learned as a boy. Not the kind used to bind an animal or secure a load. This one held under strain. This one did not slip. "If they come with papers," he said, eyes on his hands, "they'll be counting on fear, on the idea that I won't want trouble tied to my name." She swallowed. "And if they're right?" He finished the knot and set it on the table. "Then I'll untie it. But not today." She stared at the rope, understanding dawning. "You're talking about making this official." "I am." Her breath caught. "That kind of trouble doesn't go away once you invite it in." "I know," he said. "It changes. That's all." She stood slowly, moving closer to the table. "You don't owe us that." "This isn't about owing," he replied. "It's about choosing." She looked toward the baby, then back to him. "Choosing means standing in front when it turns ugly." "Yes." "And if it costs you?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "It already has. I'm still here." She reached out and touched the rope lightly, as if testing whether it was real. "I've lived my whole life being told to keep my head down," she said, "to be grateful for whatever scraps were handed to me." I don't know how to live any other way. Then we'll learn, he said. A knock sounded at the door, not the heavy one from before. This was lighter, cautious. He went to it, opened it enough to see the young deputy standing on the step, hat in hand, eyes uneasy. I shouldn't be here, the deputy said quietly, but I heard what happened. He stepped aside without a word, letting the man in. The deputy glanced at the baby by the fire, his face softening. She all right? He asked. She will be, she answered. The deputy nodded. The sheriff's under pressure, he said. So is the man behind this. They'll come back, with something official enough to make it stick. He met the deputy's eyes. What would it take to stop that? The deputy hesitated, then spoke carefully. Witnesses, a claim stronger than his, something that puts you on the right side of the law before they can twist it. He looked down at the rope on the table. And time? Not much, the deputy said. A circuit preacher's due through in a few days. Papers can be drawn if we don't wait, she finished. The deputy shifted. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, he replied. The deputy straightened. I'll do what I can, he said. But once you take this step, there's no stepping back. I'm aware, he said. When the deputy left, the house seemed to exhale. She sat again, head bowed, fingers laced tight together. I'm afraid, she admitted. So am I, he said. She looked up at him, eyes clear despite the fear. If we do this, we do it knowing it won't be easy. He slid the rope toward her. Then don't take it unless you're ready. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked it up, fingers closing around the knot, feeling its weight. I'm ready, she said. He nodded once, and the decision settling into place like a stone dropped into deep water. Outside, the day moved on. Inside, a future began to take shape, not because it was safe, but because it was chosen. Some promises weren't written on paper. Some were tied by hand, meant to hold when everything else tried to pull apart. The decision did not make the night easier. If anything, it sharpened everything. The sounds, the waiting, the weight of what could no longer be undone. He sat at the table long after she had drifted into a shallow sleep on the settee, the baby warm and steady between them. The rope lay where they had left it, the knot holding firm, a promise made without witnesses. At some point, he rose and crossed the room. He stopped in front of the door at the far end of the cabin. The same door he had avoided with the kind of discipline that passes for strength when a man has no better tools. He lifted his hand, then let it fall. Once. Twice. The third time he wrapped his fingers around the handle. The latch turned with a soft click. The door opened on air that had not been disturbed in years. Dust motes lifted, slow and bright in the lantern light. The room was small, plain, and impossibly full. A cradle stood against the wall, the wood pale where it had never been worn by use. A rocking chair waited beside it, one leg mended long ago and never tested. On a shelf, tiny clothes lay folded with careful hands, each piece stacked as if order alone might keep grief from spilling out. He stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath his weight, the sound echoing too loud in the quiet. He stood there longer than he meant to, breathing in the smell of old wood and something softer beneath it. Soap, maybe, or memory. He reached out and touched the cradle. The wood was cool under his palm. "I didn't forget," he said quietly, to no one and everyone at once. "I just didn't know how to come back." Behind him, the floor creaked again. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, as if afraid of crossing a line that wasn't hers to cross. The lantern light caught her face, the exhaustion still there, but something steadier beneath it now. "You don't have to," she said softly. He shook his head. "I think I do." She took one careful step into the room, then another. Her gaze moved over the cradle, the chair, the folded clothes. She did not reach for anything. She only looked. "It's been waiting," she said. "For a long time," he replied. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a small sound that broke the stillness. Without thinking, he reached out and brushed his finger along the child's blanket, then drew his hand back again, as if reminding himself to move slowly. "I was afraid," he said. "Afraid that opening this door meant I was letting go." She met his eyes. "Or that you were letting something else in." He nodded. "That too." She shifted the baby, careful, then lowered her into the cradle. The child sighed and settled, fitting as if she had always belonged there. The sight stole his breath. "I won't replace what you lost," she said, her voice steady. "I wouldn't want to." "I know," he said. "That's not what this is." They stood side by side, watching the small chest rise and fall. The room felt different, already. Not lighter exactly, but truer. Like something long held underwater had finally been allowed to breathe. A sound reached them from outside. Hooves. Multiple this time. Close. He turned toward the door, instinct pulling him back into the present. She straightened, lifting the baby again, her body angling toward him without hesitation. "It's time," she said. "Yes," he replied. They moved together into the main room. He set the lantern down where it would cast light through the windows, making sure nothing inside was hidden. He did not bar the door. That choice was deliberate. The knock came, firm and certain. He opened the door. The lawman stood there again, jaw tight, eyes set. The other man lingered behind him, closer now, his confidence plain. Snow clung to their coats, breath steamed in the cold air. "We're here to take her," the lawman said, "and the child." "No," he replied. The other man stepped forward. "You don't have the right." "I do," he said, cutting him off. "And I'm using it." He stepped aside then, not to yield, but to reveal. The lantern light spilled across the room, across the cradle visible through the open doorway, across the woman standing straight and unashamed, the child held secure against her chest. "She's staying," he said. "Both of them." The lawman's eyes flicked, calculating. "On what grounds?" He did not raise his voice. "On mine." The other man laughed softly. "You think that'll hold?" "I know it will," he said, "because I'm making it public." He reached for the rope on the table and lifted it, the knot plain to see. "This is my word," he said, "and it's about to be written down where you can't touch it." The lawman hesitated, just for a moment. It was enough. "We'll see," he said finally. "This isn't finished." "No," he agreed. "It's begun." The door closed. Footsteps retreated. The house settled again, the echoes fading into the night. She let out a breath she had been holding for far too long. He turned to her, something open in his expression now, unguarded. "I want to do this right," he said. "Before God and the law. I want her to have my name. I want you to stay, not as a guest." Her eyes filled, but her voice did not break. "As family." "Yes." She nodded, once. "Then I'm here." In the quiet that followed, the baby made a small sound from the cradle, a soft, contented breath. He looked toward the open doorway of the room he had kept closed for so long and felt something loosen inside his chest. The door was open, and for the first time in years, he did not want to close it again. The preacher arrived at dusk, his coat dusted white, his Bible held close. He asked no questions that needed answers. The lawman stood aside, reading the room, and found nothing left to take. Inside, the fire burned even. The baby slept in the cradle beneath the open doorway, her breath steady, her small hand loose with trust. When the words were spoken, they were simple. When the names were written, the ink held. What had stalked them in shadow failed under witness. Later, the door closed, and the yard fell quiet. She sat by the hearth, the child warm against her chest. He stood a moment, then joined them, learning again how to be still with someone else's breathing in the room. "I used to hate this night," he said softly. "And now?" she asked. He looked toward the cradle, toward the room he had kept closed too long. "Now it reminds me why I stayed." Snow drifted slow and kind. The fire settled. On a night that once echoed with loss, the house held something new. Not silence, but belonging. The baby yawned, then slept. "She'll never remember the cold," she said quietly. "No," he agreed, "but she'll remember this. The warmth, the voices, the fact of being wanted." He reached out and closed his hand around the rope still lying on the table, then set it aside. It had done its work. What held them now needed no knot. The fire settled. The night deepened. And for the first time in many years, on a Christmas night that could have ended in death and silence, the house stood full, not of noise, but of belonging. As the fire settled and the night grew quiet, the house no longer felt empty. It held the soft sounds of breathing, the weight of shared warmth, and the kind of peace that comes only after a long season of endurance. Nothing about this ending was loud or dramatic. It was gentle, like a hand resting on your shoulder when words are no longer needed. Some of us reach a point in life where we believe the door has closed for good, that the losses we carry have used up our portion of joy. But sometimes, when we least expect it, life returns, not with grand promises, but with a simple need asking to be met, a child to protect, a soul to shelter, a reason to stay. This story is not about youth or romance. It is about choosing kindness when it would be easier to turn away. About finding family not by blood, but by courage and faith. And about learning, even late in life, that it is never too late to belong. If this story stirred a memory or touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We share stories like this often, meant to be listened to slowly, like a warm conversation by the fire. And if you feel comfortable, tell us in the comments, where are you listening from tonight?